A shifting Roman world, in the heart of the Roman Empire, where power and passion intertwined, the very concept of love and desire was fundamentally different from anything we know today. But what happens when the power of emperors shifts, and the intimate dynamics of their empire collapse under new moral laws? Imagine a world where sexuality wasn't defined by labels like straight or gay, but instead by who held the power in the relationship. In ancient Rome, a marriage was more transactional than romantic, and it was common, even expected, for men to have lovers outside their wives, whether male or female. Julius Caesar, for example, was known not only for his military conquests, but also for his intimate relationships with men. For the Romans, it wasn't who you slept with. It was how you did it, and who was in control. But things changed. The very system that allowed emperors like Hadrian, who deified his young male lover Antonius, would soon face a transformation that would challenge the sexual freedoms of the elite. As Christianity began to rise, the Roman world, one of power, pleasure, and fluid sexuality, would see its most intimate practices slowly fade away. The decline of male concubinage marked the end of an era, a shift that still resonates in history today. The rise of male concubinage. In the Roman world, power was everything. On the battlefield, in the Senate, and even in the bedroom, Roman men were expected to dominate in all aspects of life, and this extended to their intimate relationships. But unlike today, love and sexuality in Rome were not bound by rigid labels. Instead, they were dictated by status, class, and authority. For the ruling elite, taking lovers was not just about pleasure, it was a statement of dominance. It was common for Roman men to engage in affairs with both women and men, as long as they maintained the role of the dominant partner. To submit, to be the one receiving in a relationship, was seen as weak, feminine, and even disgraceful. This unwritten rule shaped Roman society's approach to relationships for centuries. Pederasty, a structured relationship between an older, powerful man and a younger boy, was not just accepted, but often encouraged. For the aristocracy, these relationships served as mentorships, offering young men access to education, connections, and patronage beyond what their families could provide. For the elite, being chosen as a young lover was often seen as a privilege, but concubinage extended beyond these mentor relationships. Many of Rome's most powerful men took young male lovers who were not aristocrats, but rather slaves, war captives, or servants in the imperial household. These concubines had no real choice in the matter. Whether they were taken by a senator or even an emperor, their fates were sealed. The emperors, the most powerful men in the world, were among the most infamous for their indulgence in male concubinage. Emperor Hadrian, for example, formed an intense bond with Antinous, a Greek youth of striking beauty. Their relationship was so profound that when Antinous drowned in the Nile under mysterious circumstances, Hadrian declared him a god, ordering temples, statues, and an entire city to be built in his honor. Not all emperors treated their lovers with such devotion. Emperor Nero, known for his eccentric and often cruel behavior, took not one but two male lovers, both of whom he married in bizarre public ceremonies. One, Pythagoras, was said to have played the groom, while Nero himself dressed as the bride. In another instance, he had a young boy named Sporus, castrated and dressed in women's clothing to fulfill his fantasy of replacing his deceased wife. And then there was Tiberius, whose personal indulgences crossed the line into pure depravity. He isolated himself in a lavish villa on the island of Capri, where he gathered young boys to fulfill his darkest desires. The accounts of his actions, whether exaggerated or true, paint a disturbing picture of the absolute power Rome's rulers wielded over their lovers. For centuries, male concubinage flourished under Roman rule, tied intrinsically to power, status, and the unchallenged dominance of the ruling class. But no empire lasts forever, and neither did Rome's permissive approach to sexual power. A change was coming, one that would bring an end to this deeply ingrained practice forever. The changing landscape, the influence of Christianity. Rome, once defined by its excess and indulgence, began to change in ways no one could have predicted. What had once been a civilization built on conquest, wealth, and domination was now facing an internal revolution, not one of swords, but of faith. For centuries, power determined morality in Rome. The emperors, the aristocracy, and the elite dictated the rules, and for them, pleasure was part of that power. Male concubinage, once a sign of status and control, had been embraced by rulers, senators, and the wealthy alike. But as Christianity spread across the empire, it brought a radically different perspective, one that would shake the foundations of Roman society. At first, Christianity was a persecuted faith. Its followers hunted, tortured, and executed for their beliefs. But even in the shadows, its influence grew. Christian teachings opposed many of Rome's long-standing traditions, including its permissive attitude toward sexuality. Where Rome had once celebrated power and dominance in relationships, Christianity preached morality, chastity, and the sanctity of marriage. As the faith gained traction, its leaders condemned the Roman aristocracy's indulgences. Men taking young male concubines, once seen as a symbol of influence, was now viewed as immoral. The dynamic between master and concubine, once accepted without question, became a scandal, a sin, a deviation from what was considered righteous. By the time Constantine the Great rose to power in the early 4th century, Christianity was no longer an underground movement. It was becoming the new ideology of Rome. In 313 CE, the Edict of Milan legalized Christianity, and with it came a push to erase the moral corruption of the past. Male concubinage, once an institution of power, was now facing its greatest threat yet: the fall of male concubinage in the Roman Empire. Rome had always been a city of power over lands, over people, and over pleasure. But now, that power was slipping away. The empire that once ruled the world was not falling by the sword, but by something far more relentless: faith. Male concubinage, once a symbol of dominance and prestige, was now a dangerous relic of a fading world. The final blow came from Emperor Theodosius I. By the late 4th century, Rome no longer belonged to its emperors, it belonged to the Church. In 391 CE, Theodosius made his decree: Christianity was the only faith permitted in the empire. Pagan gods were outlawed, temples were closed or destroyed. But this was not just a war against old religions, it was a war against old desires. No longer could powerful men take their lovers without consequence. No longer could the elite parade their indulgences without fear. But not everyone surrendered so easily. In the dark corridors of Rome's palaces, whispers of defiance remained. The Church was watching, the walls had ears, and when they were caught, the punishment was brutal. Even the stories changed. The love poems once whispered in candlelit chambers were now erased, replaced with scripture. The statues that once honored beautiful young lovers were smashed, their faces left unrecognizable. Rome, the empire of indulgence, had become an empire of restraint. By the dawn of the 5th century, male concubinage was nothing more than a whisper of a forgotten past. The men who once ruled with desire were now ruled by fear. What had once been power was now sin, and in Rome, sin had no place anymore. The Byzantine Empire and the last echoes of male concubinage. The Roman Empire may have fallen, but its echoes lived on in the Byzantine Empire. A new order had risen in the East, claiming the mantle of Rome while reshaping its traditions. Here, the emperors ruled not just with military might, but with the blessing of the Church, and under its watchful eye, the last traces of male concubinage struggled to survive. Byzantium inherited Rome's love of power and luxury, but it had no tolerance for the decadence of its predecessor. The Eastern Roman emperors, now Christian rulers, were expected to uphold morality as defined by the Church. Male concubinage, once an open secret in the imperial courts, became a hidden indulgence. Those who defied the new order faced disgrace, exile, or worse. Yet, in the corridors of Constantinople's grand palaces, whispers of forbidden liaisons still remained. Some nobles clung to the past, their desires untouched by the moral tides, but the walls were closing in. Laws tightened, punishments grew harsher, and soon, even the shadows could no longer protect those who dared to defy the empire's new faith. What had once been a mark of status had now become a crime. The last echoes of Rome's lost indulgence faded into silence. End of an era. The fall of male concubinage in the Roman and Byzantine empires was not just the end of a practice, it was the death of an entire way of life. What had once been a symbol of power, status, and pleasure was now viewed as immoral, unnatural, and criminal. The men who once walked the halls of emperors, admired and desired, were now erased from history, their stories buried beneath centuries of religious dogma and political change. It was a transformation unlike any other. The same empire that had once celebrated indulgence now condemned it. The very rulers who had once defied convention were now bound by the laws of the church. The whispers that had filled the corridors of Rome and Constantinople fell silent. The golden age of imperial indulgence had turned to dust. Yet history has a way of keeping its secrets alive. The echoes of Rome's past can still be heard in the ruins of its palaces, in the writings of ancient historians, and in the scandalous rumors that never truly faded. Power shifts, laws change, but human nature remains the same. The story of Rome's male concubines is a reminder of how societies shape, enforce, and erase desires that have always existed. But what does this tell us about power, morality, and the forces that shape history? Did the fall of male concubinage mark progress? Or was it simply a new way of controlling human nature? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more untold stories from history.